Zach, good afternoon. How's it
How are
going,
you doing,
brother?
sir? This is I got to be honest with you. This is pretty incredible to be sitting here right now, getting bitten by sand fleas. I don't know how good our video is, but I am literally standing and sitting in front of my squad bay where I was back in 1992, platoon 1076, 1st Battalion. Sir, I can't put in words the feeling I have right now sitting here.
Outstanding. And this is where the journey began.
This is really where it began. I mean, this was the hardest 2 or 3 months of my entire life. It was miserable. It was horrible, but it gave me that rhino skin that you talk about so much and gave me the power to become the warrior that I ultimately became because of the challenge and the resistance and the hardship that I went through during this this training period of my life down here.
Outstanding. So what we're going to do today, Zach, is talk in depth about warrior entrepreneur. That's what we're here to talk about. You cover a lot of terrain in your book, and we're not going to cover or talk through all 16 chapters, but there are some areas that I would like to unpack. As you hear the music that is Parris Island around us, the sand fleas biting us, a sand pit in the background where you make sugar cookies. I mean, what?
I spent a lot of time in that pit, by the way, just so you know.
How would you explain this experience to someone?
So, all my life I knew I wanted to be in the Marines. I knew what the end result was, but what I didn't know is what goes into it. And there's really no way you can truly experience that. They say, what in the world would make a man give his life for another man? And it's just really hard to understand and grasp that until you go through that. And I think if you could boil it all down as when you suffer together, and this goes all the way back to Shakespeare talking about the band of brothers and he who sheds blood with me will be my brother. This is where it started. This is where it happened. And it's so great that 30 years later, we've got our next generation of warriors right over our shoulder here that are going through exactly what you and I went through.
Absolutely. So in your book, Zach, I highlighted some things to talk about today. And one of the things, since we are here, it says, I had fought so hard over the last few days that I had virtually nothing physically, mentally, or even spiritually left in me to fight. That was your COVID experience, right? Were they similar?
It's interesting because they were, and the fact that I wanted to quit, but I couldn't quit. And we always talk about never giving up, and that's the Marine ethos. But you put a framework in a place where you set yourself up that you can't quit. So when I was down here, failure was never an option. There was no way you were not going to make it through here. Now, it's interesting. When you go through OCS, it's the exact opposite.
Okay.
Attrition is their mission. They're trying to get you to go out. But when I was in that delirium, which was, by the way, is almost exactly a year ago to this date, in that hospital, and I wanted to quit, I wanted to give out, but I knew that I was a warrior and I couldn't do that. And the reason I couldn't do that, I couldn't let my family down. I couldn't let my business associates down. I couldn't let my friends down. And the same thing here, I could never let our Marines down. And one of the things that's so unique about the Marine Corps that you don't see with the other branches of service is the importance of history and how we focus on history and tying us to those Marines of the past.
Excellent. Now in here also, it has you in your Bowling Green Rugby sweatshirt, and it says, Zach Green being discharged after almost 2 weeks of hospitalization due to COVID-19 double lung pneumonia. Double lung pneumonia.
So it was horrible. I mean, we take for granted the mere act of breathing and what a gift that is. Every breath that we take in, that we take out, we don't really think about it when you're breathing because it's just something happens. But when you can't get that breath, it's a horrible feeling. It's physically painful, and it's also very shocking to know that you're trying to breathe and you can't breathe. And for me, that was the scariest point. But again, I could hear those drill instructors that I see right over our shoulder here telling me, you're a Marine, Zach, you don't give up. And I was able to carry that through not only from down here, but through my business journey and ultimately a time that truly saved my life.
Excellent. Now in here, and just over your right shoulders is the parade deck. And in your book you put, he bent over my shivering body and calmly said, I always knew you were a quitter. I always knew you didn't have what it takes to be a Marine. Your mommy and daddy aren't here to help you anymore.
So I tell you, it's emotional hearing you say that because we are literally feet away from where that moment happened. That was the most pivotal moment in my whole life, and this is the reason why. I wasn't trained to be a warrior growing up. I had parents that had very access to a lot of means, financially, from a group. I mean, a lot of love that was surrounding me. I had everything given to me. They moved me around to 7 different schools because I was always having challenges with my ADHD and learning disabilities and behavioral issues and everything else. And it was interesting because I thought I was so much better than everybody else down here when I went through that. But when I realized that the kids that were serving with me came from the inner city of Louisiana, came from the coal mines of West Virginia, came from the projects of Philadelphia, and they had so much hardship, and they were thriving down here. They were doing so much better than I was. And the reason why is they had already developed their rhino skin.
Okay.
They had already gone through multiple crucibles in their lives. Some of their crucibles were just simply getting food on the table,
Okay.
finding a place to sleep. And so for here, it was a lot easier for them than it was for me. And when he used those words that cut so deeply about your mommy and daddy aren't going to be here anymore for you, that was that real transition point where I realized I wasn't as tough, and I needed to start going through that gauntlet and that journey to become that warrior that I ultimately became.
So you survived. It clicked. You clicked off safe and you were ready to engage. You got through it and became a United States Marine. In having that foundation of honor, courage, and commitment, you've carried that with you throughout, especially as an entrepreneur. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so let's start with honor. I felt that I had let my fellow Marines down. And the reason why is there was a really horrible incident in the very early part of the war after September 11th, where one of my sister units lost over 20 Marines in one incident. And I had already gotten out of the Marine Corps at that time, and I went to a lot of those funerals, and I remember standing in front of those flag-draped coffins, knowing that there's a Marine in that box that really could have been me had I re-upped again. And so I had to carry that honor, not just to my fellow Marines, but to my country and to us as a society. And so I joined our fire department. So that was the honor component there. The next thing that came through was commitment. As I started that business and as I started to build it up, I had a commitment not only to my mission, which is so vitally important that we accomplish our mission, I had commitment to my investors that I took their money and said, I will give this money back to you at a premium, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z with it, which I ultimately have done and still am in the process of doing. I couldn't break that commitment. And then finally, you've got the courage component. I've never been more scared in my life being an entrepreneur. I've never been more scared in my life seeing our finances of my business go down and down and know my debt was going up and up and that I was ultimately going to be responsible for that. The easy thing was to quit. The easy thing down here was to quit. But that's not what makes a warrior. A warrior has that courage, has that commitment, has that honor to honor their pledge. When you and I raised our right hand and made a pledge to our country and to defend the Constitution, that is really important. That means something to people
Absolutely.
like you and me. And I think as warriors, words matter. Honor matter. Courage matter. Commitment matters. And you put all of those three together, it not only helped carry me through my very brief and unillustrious Marine Corps experience, because I served during a time that there was no combat deployments, but it really carried me through life. And again, this is where the building blocks happen. That pit right there, where we were disciplined many times, that was where you learn that commitment to not let your guys down. And I do want to share one quick story with you that was in the book and to talk about it. There was another time that I made a mistake, and the drill instructor ran us right over to this pit, and he bent everybody down on the pit except me. Now, I was the one that made the mistake. So they're all building what we call our sugar cookies, which means you're covered in that nice white sand, and they're doing the bends and thrusts and the push-ups and the sit-ups and all these very difficult exercises. And I had to stand up in front of them. And every time they did an exercise, they'd say, 1 recruit green, 2 recruit green. Oh. I let them down, and they punished them. They didn't punish me, they punished them. And that was such a horrible feeling to know that not only did I fail, but I failed for my platoon, and my drill instructor was making a point that they failed me. I didn't just fail them. Okay. They failed me because they didn't encompass me and they didn't help train me as a platoon. And we saw that a lot multiple times through training, that when you were the top guy, they would punish you if the bottom guy failed because you didn't take the initiative to help your brother out.
Outstanding. Well, Zach, you talk about some of those challenges here, and you transitioned from the Marine Corps to firefighting to entrepreneur. And in your book, you say, my first step in this entrepreneurial journey was to see if I could make a viable sale So that's the music of Parris Island in the background.
Getting ready for graduation.
Make a viable sale out of selling these glow-in-the-dark products for firefighters. I started selling them out of the trunk of my car, traveling from fire station to fire station in my free time. What were you thinking during those times? First step in your entrepreneurial journey, selling those glow-in-the-dark signs out of the trunk of your vehicle.
Yeah, so, one of the other things we learned in the Marine Corps is this concept of improvising, overcoming, adapting, and practicing. And before I could really start to raise money and bring on these investors, I had to find out if this was a viable product. I had to test things out. And just like the Marine Corps, we don't have the big money like the Air Force and the Army and the Navy has. We have to do more with less. And it's very similar as an entrepreneur. You got to do more with less. And so what I need to do is find out, is there a market for this? And one thing we talk a lot about in the book, and I'll hammer over and over again on future podcasts, it's not about features and benefits. What it's about is solving problems. And rather than me going around and talking about all this glow-in-the-dark material, what I talked about was the problem of disorientation, the problem of not being able to see in the dark, the problem that occurs when you lose track of your tools, lose track of your orientation, lose track of the rest of your team. And as I started to go out there and travel literally all over the country, I at one point in time was using a lot of social media. I went onto Facebook and said, the first fire department that responds to me, I'm going to come out and I'll buy you a pizza dinner. And it was someplace out in the middle of Arizona. There's nothing a firefighter loves more than free pizza. Well, maybe free beer, but I wasn't allowed to do that. And so I'd go out to Arizona. I met with these guys. I brought a bunch of my stuff. And I said, well, tell me about the neighboring department. Because the other thing in the Marine Corps that's very similar to the fire service, each platoon wants to have something better than the other platoon.
Okay.
And so each fire department wants to have a newer truck, a nicer tools. And they said, well, go over to this one here, because we know they're always jealous of our stuff. So I go over there, and before you know it, I'm having chow with them. They let me sleep in the squad bay or in their barracks. And I just went around from fire station to fire station, just getting introductions to each one of them, learning a string of pearls, viral marketing. I was dropping these little viruses to infect everybody else. That took me to Las Vegas, that eventually took me out into the middle of the desert, that eventually took me to San Diego before I came back 10 days later. I dropped off hundreds of samples, and over the next couple months, literally started to see thousands upon thousands of dollars of sales. And that was giving me the commitment that, hey, we really had something. And one of the fire captains, actually it may have been an assistant chief, said, you need to take this to the road and you need to go to FDIC in Indianapolis, the world's largest fire department training instructors conference,
okay.
FDIC, 40,000 firefighters that are there. And so what I went ahead and did was packed up the bags and went ahead and got the opportunity to go to FDIC, got a couple of my firefighter buddies, again, bribed them with free pizza and a nice hotel room, even there was like six of us sleeping in one hotel room. You do not want to smell what that place was like. It was horrible. And I built a soccer tent with sidewalls, literally held it together with duct tape and zip tie. We have a saying in the Marine Corps, field expedient, which basically means figure it out. We're not getting the stuff. Get that, as we call it, the 1,000-mile-per-hour tape or the 100-mile-per-hour tape, and some paracord. You can pretty much fix anything with it. We had cardboard signs. We had them marked up with black Sharpie markers, trying to get people to come to our booth. Over a 3-day period, we had so many people at our booth with such a long line that the other booths were coming over and thanking us because they had people in their booth because they were waiting in line for our booth. So we booked $100,000 of sales within 3 days.
Okay.
And I had a problem. I had no money to buy the raw material. I had no production capability to do that, and I had no way to be able to fulfill those orders. Everyone's like telling me, Zach, you got to stop. But I'm like, no, I'm a Marine. I will improvise. I will overcome. I will adapt. I'm going to honor these orders that came through here. I'm going to have the courage to figure out how to do it, even though I don't know how to do it. And I've got this commitment that I'm going to make this mission. I'm going to get these sales done. And what ended up happening was I had to refinance my house, had to max out my credit cards, had to literally start to borrow from my 401k. But that's where those basics that I learned here as a Marine, that you have to do whatever you have to do to accomplish that mission.
Outstanding. And it paid off, because further in your book it says, the greatest accolade was being selected to represent the 10 of clubs in the frontline leaders deck of cards that was based off the deck of cards that was used in the Iraq War to identify high-value Iraqi criminals.
So, sir, I have this deep sense of, I don't know what the word is, if it's a survivor's guilt, if it's a shame that I've let my Marine Corps down, that I've let my brothers and sisters down. And I think I've been fighting my whole entire life to try to recover that and to try to get something back, which is one of the reasons I'm so blessed to be able to come down here to Parris Island and participate in the Living History Detachment and feel like I need to do something. You know, they always say you leave the Marine Corps better than you left it. You can never, ever get enough out of it. You always want to try to put more back into it. And so for me, to be recognized as one of the top 52 veterans in the entire country that's an entrepreneur, being mentioned with the groups like Grunt Style Apparel and Nine Line and Wounded Warrior Foundation, and I got to be honored with that. It was such a great privilege. I finally felt like I had started to come full circle, because even though I can't pick up a gun and go fight for my country anymore, I don't think I could even fit in my uniform, to be honest with you, sir. Plus I'm too old, which makes me feel bad. But I'm giving back. I'm serving my country even though I'm no longer in uniform. I'm serving my country by giving jobs to Americans, by helping our fellow veterans pursue their dreams in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, and it wasn't easy. You talked about some of the challenges, some of the obstacles, some of the failures. And one thing I like in your book is that in the section on entrepreneurs, a reporter once asked Edison, how did it feel to fail 1,000 times? And Edison stated, I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps. Edison went on to say, great success is built on failure, frustration, and catastrophe. And I wouldn't say you faced all of those here aboard Parris Island, but it was damn close.
I did, but more importantly, there was virtually nothing I learned here at Parris Island that I could take out in the real world. There was virtually nothing I learned in the Marine Corps that I could take out in the real world, otherwise I'd get arrested probably,
Okay.
right? It was those intangibles. It was those solving problems. It was all those things like leadership, honor, courage, commitment. Those were the things that helped me. And what I learned in the Marine Corps is you don't quit when you don't get it right. You quit when you finish the mission, when you're done, when you're successful. And just like Edison, you try over and over again. And it brings us to the very last page of my book, which is, I think, the greatest quote ever. And that is by Teddy Roosevelt, The Man in the Arena, where he talks about the true champion is not the one in the back sitting there saying, I could have done this, I could have done that. But they've never experienced defeat or victory. It's the man in the arena that's face is scarred and covered in mud. And I think that reporter's a perfect example of a guy sitting on the sideline saying, well, you failed all those times, but he wasn't the one that put it out there like Edison did.
Outstanding. Zach, being here aboard Parris Island, getting eaten alive by sand fleas.
All over.
Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap things up?
No, I think, sir, just for me, appreciation to you for welcoming me as a friend and hopefully now as a colleague, is being able to complete this circle and this journey for me, which is so incredible. You know, it was over 30 years since I was here and never thought I'd come back on the island again, never wanted to, but I realized what a beautiful island it actually is when you get outside of just that area. The excitement to see these young recruits behind us that are going through the first couple of phases. These are young recruits that have only been down here for probably a couple of weeks. They haven't quite exceeded. You can see they're not marching as perfectly as good as some of the other recruits that have been here a little bit longer, but knowing that those guys have my back just the same as I have their back, because they're my brother Marines or will be my brother Marines. And that goes back to Sir meeting someone that's 80, 90 years old in a wheelchair that's got that World War II hat on, knowing that we had that connection there.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it's not just about the Marine Corps, it's about that warrior ethos, about having adversity, preparing you for your crucible, and then overcoming and conquering that crucible.
Without question. And as with every episode, Zach and I like to dedicate an episode to a fallen service member. And this time I'm going to recognize Senator Mike Mansfield. He was born 16 March 1903. His mom died when he was 7 years old. He's unique because he joined the Navy at 14 years old. He was tossed out, joined the Army for 2 years and discharged. Then on 10 November 1920, he saw the light and enlisted in the Marine Corps.
On 10 November of all days.
Of all days, 10 November 1920. He succeeded Lyndon Johnson as Senate Majority Leader and held the post from 1961 until 1977, and then he became ambassador to Japan. He retired in 1989. As a Majority Leader, he wielded much power, and during the 1960s and 70s, he helped win passage of major civil rights legislation. Again, this is Michael Joseph Mansfield, Private, United States Marine Corps.
And we'll finish like we do every one of our episodes.
Semper
Semper
Fidelis.
Fidelis.